I just want to show you what can happen when you don't take great care of your violin bow. If it sits in the closet for a long time, if the temperature changes dramatically, this is the kind of thing that can happen. The hair can split, and there's really no way to fix it unless you get a complete rehair of your bow. Take good care of your bows. Hi, and welcome back to Bow and Arrow. I'm Nicolette. I'm a violinist and fiddler, bringing you tips, tutorials, and practice strategies for beginner violinists. In today's video, I'll be covering everything you need to know in order to take great care of your violin bow, and I'll also be covering some of the mistakes that you should avoid. Before we get into the weeds of bow care, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so that you never miss another violin tip or tutorial from me. The first thing I think is really important for you to know about your bow is what it's made of. Just because we know our violin is made of wood doesn't mean you're 100% confident that your bow is also made of wood. Your bow could be made of a synthetic material, and it can be made of a lot of different kinds of wood. So the quality varies significantly depending on what the instrument and what the bow is made of. Synthetic bows are often marketed as unbreakable. You can see a lot of the marketing will tell you that you could basically drive over them and they wouldn't break. And that might very well be true, but it doesn't necessarily tell you a whole lot about the quality of the bow. It just means that you're not going to drop your bow on the floor and split it in half, which I have seen happen to a wooden bow before. It's always good practice not to drop your bow on the floor. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Another part of this is that it's not just that the stick is synthetic. You could also be buying bow hair that is synthetic and not know it. You know, we got to look out for what everything is made of because I haven't really heard synthetic bow hair that sounded great. You should know that the quality of the materials that you're using matters. And if you're using cheaper materials, that might lead you to encounter some more issues with your instrument and your bow down the road. There's nothing wrong with getting an inexpensive instrument or bow to get started. But just because you're spending less up front doesn't mean that you won't have to replace these items in the future. And then you may take a second look at some of the more expensive items on the market. So be careful and take good care of your gear while it's still new so that it can last a long time. And when you're ready, you can make the jump for a more expensive item. Okay, so here's what we do with a bow. When you take the bow right out of the case, it's gonna look like this. It's gonna look really loose, and the horsehair is going to be kind of wiggly, and you might even see like some of the hairs are sort of dangling down straight. This is totally normal, and all we're gonna do is we're gonna take the screw at the very bottom of the bow, at the frog, and we're going to tighten it. So you may have to turn it several times, depending on how tight your bow is, and this is actually different bow to bow, but you want to tighten it about a pinky's width in the very center where the taper is happening. We want to keep a nice bend in the stick. We don't want the stick to be perfectly straight, and we also definitely do not want it to bow out in the opposite direction. We want to keep this nice curved stick where middle is the narrowest and the tip and the frog are the widest gaps. So the tightness of the bow really affects the sound, and it really affects the way that it feels in your hand. So you may need to experiment a little bit with how tight exactly you like your bow to be, and you'll discover this more as you learn to play. Last but not least about tightening is we always want to loosen the bow back up before we put it away in the case. This is because it'll protect the bow stick and the bow hair depending on the scenario when it's in the case, and it's also going to prevent it from over tightening if the climate changes in your area, or if the humidity changes in your area, or maybe you're going on a trip and the altitude changes. All these things and these factors have an effect on the wood and the horsehair and the tightness of your bow. Really important, never touch the hair with your fingers. Even if you've just washed your hands, your fingers do have some oil on them. And if we touch the horsehair, we're actually going to let that oil collect on the surface of the horsehair. It's going to be resistant to rosin, and it's going to start to collect dirt and dust. And you can see the difference between a new haired bow, a clean bow hair, and a dirty horsehair. Let's talk about rosin now. So rosin is an essential part of the violin player's toolkit. Rosin is a tree sap that's been purified and refined and then dried into a stick that we can then apply to the bow hair, and it creates like a chalkiness to the bow hair that allows us to create friction on the string while we're bowing. Without this rosin, we won't be able to make any sound come out of the violin. How much rosin do we actually need to put onto the bow? This is actually a really hard question to answer, because when people take out their bow and it's brand new and it has no rosin on it at all, it's gonna be a lot. A lot of rosin is really necessary in order to make that sound come out. But the actual rosin that you get is also brand new, and it doesn't actually have any give to it. So you need to work the rosin so that it will really start to release actual chalk onto the bow hair. This may take something like 15 minutes, especially if the rosin or the bow is on the cheaper side. Once you get a good layer of rosin on your bow and you're starting to practice more, you might see that your rosin lasts maybe 1 to 2 practice sessions. So every other practice session, depending on how long you're practicing for. And then you just apply a few coats of it back and forth along the stick, really spending time rosining, especially the lower half and the very tip of the bow. But again, this is the kind of thing that is really personal, and it is specific to you as a player, and it's specific to you in how much you're practicing. Start to learn a little bit more about how much rosin you like to have on your bow as a preference, and how often you're practicing. And those things will all work together. Okay, so we've gotten to the end of the regular maintenance. We're gonna talk about the larger maintenance item, which is a rehair of your bow. If you don't know what a rehair is, it's basically when you're at the end of the cycle with your bow hair will wear out. It will need to be replaced. And then you can take it to a luthier, somebody who works on instruments, can actually have the bow hair taken out and replaced with brand new horsehair. So this is a regular practice that professionals typically get every 6 months to a year. For new beginners and students, more like a year to a year and a half, or even 2 years, depending on how long you have your violin for. If the student in question is pretty young, it's likely that you won't actually need to get a rehair before your child will need a new size violin. That's probably going to happen before you need a rehair. A good time to look into a rehair is when you've had your bow for a long time. If it's starting to gather dirt at the frog or at the tip, maybe a luthier is in your town or a neighboring town. This is a great way to get to know a local violin shop as well. If there is absolutely no way that you're going to be able to get a rehair, but you don't want to reinvest in a bow, you can actually clean your bow hair. It's actually a pretty simple method. All of the items can be found at like a hardware store. So I'll link a video tutorial for how to do that in the description box. I hope this video was really helpful for you. I hope this answered a few questions. If you want to keep learning with me, check out my 30-day violin course, Violin for Beginners, Basics to Brilliant, where I teach you all of the basic technique and melodies. And you can even submit videos of your practice to me so you can get some feedback on your playing. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more violin tips and tutorials. Thanks for watching.